What's the number one most important AI skill that you can put into practice today? And how can you know if your executive team is coming up to speed as quickly as they need to? Well, I've got some good news for you. You should have a definite answer by the end of this episode. Stay tuned. Hi, I'm Courtney Baker, and this is AI Know-How from KnownWell, helping you reimagine your business in the AI era. As always, I'm joined by KnownWell CEO David DeWolf, Chief Product Officer Mohan Rao, and Chief Strategy Officer Pete Buer. And we're bringing you not one, but two conversations with AI experts today. Karen Posey talks with Pete Buer about the mindset CEOs need to bring to the boardroom in the age of AI. But first, Dan Sanchez joins me for a segment we're calling AI Skills. Friend of KnownWell, Dan Sanchez, aka Danchez, joins us today to talk about AI skills.
Thanks for having me on the shows. I'd love to talk about what I'm learning and how other people can learn and actually go beyond playing too.
You are the best at doing this. I think so many of your guides have been so practical and applicable for just like trying out how to use AI with a specific use case. So for all the marketers out there, make sure you check out Dan's podcast, The AI-Driven Marketer. Or if you're listening and you know a marketer that's interested in AI, send them to Dan. Dan, I want to get your opinion for everybody listening. I'd love for you to just break down one skill that you think would be helpful for executives to try out, and then kind of walk us through the use case, how we should go about trying it.
My favorite thing to start with is just the Plus version of ChatGPT. There's a free version, but I highly recommend just paying for Plus. You'll get access to something called custom GPTs. And these are essentially I loved it. I think a guest I had on my show, I think he was on KnownWell, was Andre Ye. Was he on your show?
Andre Ye, yes. Very friend of the show.
He had an excellent metaphor. He called custom GPTs as like the Excel of AI. It is the general purpose app that can accomplish many different things if you just put a little bit of instructions into it. And it's the thing that we all need to learn in order to understand how AI actually works. Because prompting is one thing, but learning how to really write, essentially, I almost just call them step-by-step prompts. Like, hey, when I give you this, then AI do this, and then ask me this. And then it becomes this chain of instructions that you can use to go from singular tasks with ChatGPT to doing small projects. And even if you're an executive, I promise there are things that you do every week or every month, and it's kind of a burden. You have to go through the same checklist to make sure you get this report out or to analyze this thing and give some feedback to maybe a direct report that you have. And it's cumbersome. It's repetitive. Think about what steps there are in it. You can document those steps almost as if delegating it to an assistant and see if you can get AI to do it. That would be the one tip that I would recommend doing it, because in doing that, you are learning how to fundamentally use AI, because that's what all the developers, that's what all the people like me who are diving deep are essentially doing. I'm just rewriting instructions to be more clear, more precise, to make sure the input that I'm putting into AI is giving me closer and closer to what I'm hoping for as an output.
Is there any hangups that you foresee? So I'm brand new to this. If I start building this out, are there things that you could go ahead and advise as these executives are getting started that they might get hung up on? Just very practically, any other things that we need to know before we get started?
Experimentation is the key. It's almost good to just go in and just start fumbling around with it and getting into it. And then I think the one thing people get stuck on the most is that they expect it to work well on the first pass. And I'm like, no, that's rough draft. Like, I think the difference is people are like, oh, AI doesn't do a good job of turning podcast notes into blog posts. I'm like, well, yeah, but how many iterations did you go through? Because when I'm building a custom GPT, I will run a first pass of instructions and then run through it a few times and be like, it's not doing really well here and there. And I will go and change it. And then it'll do a little better. And then I'll change it and it'll do a little bit better. It's that process of optimization. But that's where the real reps come in to learning how to use AI. That's where the real learning comes in, taking multiple iterations in order to improve it.
So I've had the privilege of reading some of the ways you've used custom GPTs in your own work, but I'd love for you to share your favorite one that saved you maybe the most time.
My favorite one is a custom GPT I call My Showrunner. You could actually go to myshowrunner.com. If you put in your email, it'll just show you the instructions and you'll see what it does. I give it away for people to build their own showrunners, but essentially does all the pre-production for my podcast. Because, pre-production, it's not like it takes a long time, but, you have to look up your guest, look at their LinkedIn profile, think about what kind of angles they can come from, and then pick the angle for your show, come up with the title so that you know what you're shooting for, come up with the questions, and then write the email to send them the questions, right? Multiple steps, takes about 60 minutes. But this custom GPT starts off, it's like, hey, are we doing a guest or a solo? Oh, guest? Great. Just copy and paste their LinkedIn profile, put it in here. It goes and reads it and then does a little research on Bing to find other things they had written and posted about, comes up with the angles, like, hey, which angle do you want? And you're like, ooh, okay, yeah, angle 3 looks good. Or sometimes I'm just like, hey, I know I want to talk to him about this. It's like, great, here's 10 possible titles, and it just writes the titles. And of course, I'm feeding it examples of what good titles is, and that's what I did with the custom GPT. It's like a PDF with example titles. So it runs based off those. I like one of the titles, maybe merge 2 of them together. It's like, great, based on that title and that angle and the guest's experience, because now it's starting to stack. It's starting to remember all these things, and it's starting to get more powerful. It then writes all the questions. And I'll usually copy and paste the questions into a note to cover later, and it writes the email for me that I need to send to the guest. I copy paste it, send to the guest, and we're off and away. It's now what used to take me 60 minutes to do, now it takes me 3 minutes. It's done.
I love that.
And it's better and faster. And that's a small example of what AI can do in just this little micro environment. Eventually, it'll be able to do more than that as we start to hook it up to our podcast host and all the other stuff. But custom GPTs, like I said, Andre did a great job of talking about how it's the Excel sheet. It is. You can build a lot of things with Excel. Custom GPTs is where you're going to be able to build all these little custom, essentially applications where AI can do a lot of things for you.
I love that. Such a great example. Dan, thanks for joining us today.
Thanks for having me.
Our very first episode was on the topic of building an AI literate leadership team. That was in September, and a lot has happened in the world of AI since then. I sat down with David and Mohan recently to talk about how executives can gauge their leadership team's AI IQ. About 6 months ago, we launched this very podcast, and you two became the stars that you are. And on that original podcast, we talked about getting your team ready for AI. How do you train your team? And today I want to talk about that again. And I want to talk specifically about your executive team and how you're doing, kind of a state of the union, kind of taking a moment in time as executives and really examining where your company is, specifically where your executive team is. And if you're not where you think you should be, what are the steps that you need to take to get ready? I feel like, I'm curious if you two agree with this. I was listening to another podcast, shocking, about AI, and they said very clearly they feel like the hype cycle is past, and so many of the companies they're interacting with, their use of AI is just people using ChatGPT. And that's kind of where it started and ended because they've been trying things and just not seeing the return. And we've kind of talked along those lines. So I think in this moment, one, I would love to give some direction, but also how do we overcome that in organizations if we've kind of hit the excitement and are kind of coming down off the other end of in the trenches, in companies, especially non-technology companies. How do we keep going from here?
If the hype around AI is coming down, I don't know if it's coming down, but let's say it's coming down. That's a good thing in my book, right? Because now you can start thinking about real applications and real sort of use cases in your company, as opposed to falling to the hype that's out there. So generally from what I'm seeing, people are working with AI technologies at the edges still, right? There are very use cases that are very individual in nature, whether it's in software development or content writing, so on and so forth, that we've talked about. But enterprises still have not tackled this because it's a hard thing to tackle across the board. There are not that many products out there that work well for you. It's hard to build this yourself. So still, I think this is a wave that's going to go on for many years before it reaches some level of maturity. So it's still early, even though the hype might have died down.
There's no way the hype cycle is done. Like, I'm sorry. Like, that podcast's just wrong, right? Like, I just don't get that. I'm sorry. I agree with Mohan. Like, there is always a gap between the hype and the reality. And to the degree what that podcast is trying to speak to is that gap is not as wide as it used to be. And maybe the hype is more aligned to the reality, then I'll give that an element of truth there. I think that's probably true. At the same time, if you think about Gartner's true hype cycle, there is no way we are past the peak right now. Like what I see is a doubling down. What I see, the element of truth that I'd pick out of that comment is I do think that the hype of ChatGPT itself and simply having this green screen that I can type into and it will give me answers that kind of blow my mind, I think that hype's gone away. I think what you see is real applications of the technology just starting, where the power of artificial intelligence is being embedded into smart user experiences that solve real problems. I think that journey is just getting started and is just going to fuel more hype when it really hits. And that's why I would say the hype's not over. If anything, it's just beginning, and it's just going to grow from here.
I think that's totally right. And for any executives that you've been trying these tools and are just finding disappointment, I feel like so many things of what we have right now is, a large language model with just a thin wrapper. So it's like, it feels like the same thing over and over again. And so to your point of this whole new era of tools and application at a whole different level, I think if you're an executive out there, hold on to that. I think you're totally right. The hype cycle isn't over. But if you are feeling some fatigue in your organization, how do we get the excitement back? And how do we continue to train our executive teams so we're ready?
I mean, I think that's a smart question. I think the fatigue is real. I agree with Mohan of what I have seen. There's no doubt that if you rewind 9 months to a year, there was all this excitement. People were experimenting using, but they were kind of paralyzed. They didn't know how to actually use it in real use cases. Then we moved past a point of more and more we're using it. Here's the big shift that has happened in my mind since that first episode. I think we've talked a lot on this episode about top down, how you drive change, thinking about it holistically along your business. I actually think, unlike a lot of technologies, AI adoption in the enterprise is going to be driven from both directions at the same time. I think where we're seeing the most movement is grassroots efforts, and what executives can do is actually encourage and get out of the way the people that are closest to the actual user, closest to the actual customer, closest to the problem, can, if they have the ingenuity and have the knowledge and have the space and have the time, experiment and solve real problems and drive a lot of productivity very, very quickly. And I would really encourage leaders to create an environment for that type of experimentation, for that type of freedom, and then figure out, just monitor, just watch, where is it thriving, and then double down on that and try to help support the cascading of it from the grassroots effort. Now, I think there are larger AI initiatives that are more operational in nature, more strategic in nature, that are about the orchestration of work and that type of thing that should be thought top down, like we talked about, and sponsored by leaders and identified very real use cases. But I think you have to have both and to navigate this period of time well. And I think that's the big aha that I have come to, that I think has changed since the first time we talked about this.
Yeah, David, I think I'm going to extend what you said. I think experimentation, getting out of the way, those things are super important, but leadership also should be thinking about a framework around responsibility and governance, about how this is going to be used. Talk about thinking about future talent required for this type of a transformation. As you know, it's really hard to do these things very quickly, right? So it's a multi-year journey to get to a future state of organization, a state of governance, a state of new strategy. And those things should be worked on in parallel while encouraging experimentation and getting out of the way. So it's really an and from a leadership perspective that one should be focused on.
I have a set of questions that may help executives think through just, again, state of the union. Where are you with AI in your company? I want to give you a few, David and Mohan, and then see if you have any that you would add to the list. Okay. Again, to give them kind of a sense of where they are. So the first question is just how many organization-wide AI trainings have you conducted? Have you done any? What does that look like? How many AI initiatives or experiments do you currently have underway? What's your budget for AI tools or applications? Have you rolled out any company-wide policies around AI use? How many people have gotten certifications? What does your change management process look like? What about reskilling or upskilling? What else would you add to that list of just trying to take stock of where you've come so far, really a year after the introduction of ChatGPT?
What I'd add to the list is, have you considered the new opportunities to update your business strategy? All right. So doing a new SWOT analysis in this era of possibility with AI and getting to a new SWOT that allows you to update your strategy.
I agree with all that. I would also add kind of more grassroots efforts, questions. So for example, who are the champions in the organization that really seem to know and understand AI? Right. And I would ask that at a couple different levels, maybe from the strategy and leadership question, but really at the grassroots level. Like who is the engineer? Who's the analyst? Who is the wonk that is just geeking out on these tools? I would want to know that. And then I would lift them up as examples and show great things they're doing with it. I would ask the question, what is the small grassroots experiment that has transformed our business more than any other? I would proclaim that from the rooftops and set it forth as an example. Those are the types of questions that I think I would add to the list that I probably wouldn't have said 6 months ago.
That's great. And if you missed some of those questions, don't worry, we're going to have them available for a download in our show notes, so you won't want to miss those. One other thing I was thinking, I think this is a really great practice for an executive team to go through collectively, because I think there may be differences in these questions. It may be great to have your whole leadership team be thinking about these as well, especially if you're a larger organization, that you're going to need to surface some of these wins that have happened with AI. Again, regardless of where you are on the hype cycle, I do think there is a sense as executives that we need to keep the momentum going, keep the energy going. Any last thoughts on how we do that piece of it? How do we keep the momentum going?
I think starting off with your customers in mind is never a failing strategy for you, right? So starting with what can you do better for your customers? Can you offer better products? Can you offer better services? Are there unique capabilities that you can build in your organization that serves customers better? So just getting to that angle as opposed to an enterprise angle could be also very, very useful here.
Yeah, and I think I would go to the motivation and inspire part of that, right? When we were talking about those grassroots efforts, I think a theme that you heard in the questions that I put out is a theme of raising up, praising, talking about, setting as an example those folks that are taking this new technology and applying it to have an impact on the business. I think if you want to create energy and momentum, that's what you look for. If you have none of it, you don't have energy and momentum. And so your job is to lead by example. Find a point or two where you can do it, or find the individual that can and encourage them personally to do it. But if you have any of it, I would say create the environment where that is seen and recognized and praised. And I think you'll start to see more and more of it as people learn that it is safe to do that. And I think as you begin that journey, you'll find more and more momentum when you empower people to truly leverage these tools.
David, Mohan, thank you.
Awesome.
That was a weird ending.
I'll already have kind of pen motion.
Earlier this year, we gathered some of the smartest and brightest executives from professional service firms to talk about what's actually happening with client retention in those firms today. It was such a robust conversation that we wanted to make it available to more of you. So if you work in a professional service company, we want to give you access. You can watch it right now at knownwell.com/executive roundtable. We hope you enjoy it. What questions do C-suite leaders have about AI? Pete Buer sat down with Karen Posey recently to find out.
Karen, welcome. It's so great to have you on the podcast.
Pete, great to be here. Thank you.
If we could just frame things up for context for listeners, could you give us some background on your company, KP Strategies, and your role?
Happy to do it. Yeah, I'm CEO and founder of KP Strategies. And really what we do is we work with mid-market CEOs, helping them drive growth through solving the hard stuff, which is organizational design, people and talent, because that's where everybody goes sideways.
How about it for starters? As you know, we have a focus on adopting AI in this podcast. You're talking to CEOs every day. What are the big things they're worried about? What are your conversations together about?
Well, the CEOs, by the time a lot of them get to me, they're frustrated. They're frustrated by either they're getting mediocre growth or they've got a ton of growth, but their operations can't keep up, or they're not happy with their leadership team. Those are some of the common overall challenges they face. And then when it comes to AI, they certainly have expressed some other aspects that I'm happy to share.
Yeah, please, let's do it.
Yeah, as it relates to AI, I've been working with 14 high-tech CEOs since 2019. And, it's interesting for them, this year is really a key focus on AI. And with Microsoft Copilot that just came out, they're all trying to figure out candidly, how do I monetize this? What's a service line I can create? How do I really take advantage of AI? And I would say a lot of them are still in that heavy discovery mode.
Wow, that's very cool. And you said many times it's not so much the strategy, but the execution, the people, the leadership, the transformation work where things break down. So CEOs are frustrated. Transformation is some of the challenge, but also you've got the core question of how to monetize. When you're in jam sessions, figuring out how to monetize together, are you seeing patterns? Are there sort of like the three things you do before everything else, or the whatever?
No, it's more of here's what we're trying, right? They're all experimenting right now. So I wouldn't really say one thing came out more than others. I think right now for a lot of them, they're kind of taking a step back. And I think the biggest opportunity they're realizing is that when it comes to AI, it really is all about solving customer problems. So that is the one thing I will say. And so they're looking at, as we look at our customers, what are their biggest challenges? And what I've been really challenging them to do is it's one thing to get insight from, I would say, for lack of a better word, users within an organization, but really talking to decision makers within their customers. What are the biggest challenges they're trying to solve, and how might AI solve that for them? And I think that's really the opportunity.
You referenced leaders as at times a weak point in the chain of driving change. In this episode elsewhere, we talk about how CEOs are trying to get a feel for the skill level, acumen, experience around AI of their leadership team. How would you go about testing for that? Or what do you look for when you're trying to understand if a team is ready?
Well, there's certainly one of the big things I'm a huge advocate of, and actually I'm going to be doing a video on this that I'll be posting in the next week or so. But I think, first and foremost, understanding who you have on your leadership team from a behavioral assessment standpoint and really understanding their strengths, what they can really do for you. Because one of the things I just wrote about is what kind of got a lot of these companies where they are today isn't going to get them to the next level, right? And whether we like it or not, the leaders that were with you when you were 20 million might not be the same leaders that can get you now that you're at 85 million. Don't think they can potentially get you to 250 million when you look at clients' goals and really where they want to grow with the company. And so when you look at that and you really look at the sophistication of some of those folks, I think, when you look at those behavioral assessments and you look at what are those knowledge, skills, attributes you're really looking for in your organization, I think AI needs to be a core that people start looking at, especially as it relates to folks in the service area. You look at customer experience, customer success, whatever you might want to call it in your organization. One of the trends we're also seeing right now is a big shift, even from something as simple as the traditional project management. That's really being shifted to client success managers. And it's not that they don't need to understand the principles of project management, but gosh, it's changed so much. It's now more about agile, and there's so many other things you need to be thinking about. But at the end of the day, if you're not focused on the customer, then what are you doing? Right? And I think that's where companies are really starting to wake up in the middle market. I think the larger companies have already been there, but in the middle market, I'm really seeing CEOs and COOs really look at customer success and what it really could mean in their organization and how are they really working with their customers through these big projects they're winning and whatnot. I don't know if that really answered your question, Pete.
Well, it does. It does. And I'd like to pick it up and run with it a bit further because
Sure.
What I heard you say actually is, sure, there's some amount of benchmark AI facility required of everyone nowadays, but instead where you focused was the skills, capabilities, experience to grow businesses, to scale, to, run operations at a different level of scale than today, and I think, AI is an enabler, but at the end of the day, the skills and capabilities are about running and managing and growing businesses. So it makes total sense to me. You referenced project management and customer success to massively oversimplify your answer. Are there other sort of line item capabilities about growing businesses that are more in the spotlight today than maybe they were yesterday?
Well, I think the role of sales has forever changed. The pandemic has totally changed that. I would say actually marketing and sales, even for high-tech companies, and we can talk about medical. My background's a lot of high-tech IT and medical healthcare. But I would say that, in the past, it was a lot of the product would sell itself, especially in high-tech, right? And I think it's taking that step back now and really looking at, are you a thought leader? Because that's what people want. It's all about your content and your thought leadership. It's not about your widget. And the companies that have figured that out are the companies that are really, I'm seeing, excelling. So that's another area where there's a lot of conversations with CEOs and the C-suite. The other area I would tell you that, I haven't found one CEO in the middle market that isn't struggling with this, and that's culture. Culture has been significantly impacted. Everybody's, the larger companies have already made their decision. All right, you're going back hybrid, you're going back, 3 days a week. Or 2 days a week, whatever it might be. In the high tech realm, some of them never went remote, right? So it just depends on the industry. But I would find I'm finding a lot of service industries and whatnot. They're now saying, all right, we can't tolerate this anymore. It is really impacting our culture. We have got to come back to some hybrid situation. And they're in the process of doing that right now. And it's, as simple as it sounds, in the mid-market, this is painful. This is really painful. And for some of my clients, they already got rid of their space. So now they're having to take a step back and go, okay, how are we going to do this? What's the smart way to do it? So yeah, just a lot of, I'll tell you, being a CEO today, specifically in the mid-market, well, I would say, any CEO, it's a lonely job. And, 61% of folks that are CEOs that are lonely, it really impacts their performance. And that's based on a study done. So I think the role of a CEO is harder today than it ever has been because there's just so many other dynamics and, for lack of a better word, noise that kind of gets in the way. I actually have a session that I work with CEOs on and that's called doing the things that only you, the CEO, can do. And there's 6 things that only they can do. And as I start working with the organizations, I not only help the CEO, but their leadership team to do those things that only they can do, because otherwise they get caught up in too much other, what I call stuff, that's not moving the needle, not helping them grow, not helping them innovate. And that's really where they could be opening their eyes to what AI could be doing in their organization. Right. But instead they're just so caught up in the noise of the day-to-day operations of the business. That's dangerous. It's real dangerous.
The pacing of business decision-making and the driving of change is unlike it has ever been before. And I think AI is in fact an enabler of that, because you can make a decision and start driving it to change your business model on a timeline completely different from what life was like in the past, where long lead time development projects, were required to get there. And that's not the case anymore. So I guess what I was wondering is change management something that is raising its head among the CEO squad?
100%. And, it's interesting. I saw a podcast with Jamie Dimon, CEO of JP Morgan Chase, and Bob Eisner, CEO of Disney, last week. And it was a great clip because one of the things they really stressed was speed today, and the organization's ability to move quickly is so important. And I'll tell you, the mid-market CEOs I'm working with right now, that's all about their leadership team.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
I mean, at the end of the day, they are the linchpin, to your point, for any change going on. And if you're not constantly changing and evolving, you might be dead and you don't even know it yet.
Thank you. You travel in such interesting circles. Your role is multifaceted and cool. We're grateful that you would come and share some perspectives with us here today. Thank you.
Thanks, Pete. Really enjoyed it.
Thanks as always for listening and watching. Don't forget to give us a 5-star review on your podcast player of choice. And we'd really appreciate it if you can leave a review, or even better than that, actually share this episode with someone else. At the end of every episode, we like to ask one of the large language models to weigh in on the subject at hand. So, hey, ChatGPT, wasabi. I can't pull it off, but it really makes me laugh. Hey, ChatGPT, what's happening? This episode, we're talking about how to tell if your C-suite is knowledgeable about AI. What do you think?
Hey there. It's all about checking if your C-suite can not only drop buzzwords, but also understand AI's practical applications and potential pitfalls. If they're actively exploring AI strategies and fostering a culture of innovation, they're on the right track.
And now you're in the know. Thank you for watching. We'll see you next week with more headlines, roundtable discussions, and interviews with AI experts. Hey, if you made it this far in the episode, first of all, thank you. And second, we know that AI is changing all the time, and so we've got you covered. Here is another great episode for you to watch to stay in the loop on what's happening in AI and business. And second of all, we'd love for you to subscribe. You can do that right here. I've always wanted to do that, by the way. So do that now. That would be great.